Now we're live. There we go. All right. Thank you all for joining me this lovely Monday night. Usually unusual primary host now because Kyle, unfortunately, is not feeling well, so it will just be me tonight. We are just gonna be going through what we've been doing, what we did last week, going through each position, looking at some guys at each position that the Bills might be interested in. We'll do a quick roundup. If we have the time, we'll do some true or rubbish, or if you're even interested in that at that point, because you'll probably be sick of hearing my voice. But before we get to any of that, folks, we have some sponsors for this show. Not the least of which is, well, you guys, people who subscribe to Cover One using One Pass, our subscription service that will land you in-depth, fantastic, wonderful Bills content all year round. For just $57 a year, you'll have access to exclusive articles and content. This is in addition to the Cover One Slack channel, which has a big community of people always talking day in, day out, all different sorts of topics. It's a great community. This overall just averages out to about $5 a month. You'll get the best Bills content anywhere on this World Wide Web. That is Cover One Pass Plus and a decal. And, who doesn't want that kind of stuff? So sign up for One Pass today, $57 a year. That's less than $5 a month. It's a great decision, and it supports the people here at Cover One and everything that we do. So thank you. Sponsored by everyone's favorite fantasy site, and that is Underdog Fantasy. If you have the chance to get Josh, whether it's this year or some other year, Underdog's fantasy. I can read. Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em contest will allow you to win money predicting if Josh Allen will go over his yard totals, his touchdowns, his completions, or more. Will blow up this week. You can put them both in your pick'em, predict up to 5 different over-unders correctly, and you can win 20 times your original money. If you use the promo code COVER1, that's the number 1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is 100 free US dollars in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start. And last, but of course not least, is the wonderful sponsor that we have from BetUS, and to read that we have the even more wonderful Greg Thompson.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500 or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
Thank you, Greg. Greatly appreciate you every single week doing that live for us. Like I said at the top, we're just going to be going through each position on defense. We're going to target some guys that we think will be good fits for this defense. Whether the Bills will be interested or not, we'll discuss that too. So we are not going to waste any more time, but we are going to do a very quick roundup. There's really not much. Basically, players reported to facilities for their offseason workout. Saw Josh Allen, you saw Jordan Poyer, and if you saw the video of them taking lemons, cool, I guess. They are good for scurvy, so good for the Bills. They're getting back into the swing of things. So it'll be interesting to see how that all goes. And of course, with the draft coming up, you'll have rookie mini camp coming. So pretty not that interesting. So let's get on to the meat of this. And let's talk about some different positions for this team, because despite being a very good defense and having some really good players on this defense, there are areas to improve. And actually, RJ, thank you. I guess in my mind, AJ Klein being back is not really news to me. It is news, and it should be brought up. But you know, it is AJ Klein. So very quickly, yeah, AJ Klein, yeah, this just helps them, give them some fallback depth and special teams guy to, you know, help fill out the roster. I imagine he'll be on the roster, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. At the very least, it makes you feel slightly more comfortable about where the Bills will be moving forward in this draft. You know, if they take a linebacker or if they don't, you know, you still have guys like Milano. You know, it is what it is. Yes, yeah, exactly. It's technically news, especially for the offseason. Very good point. But and we will get to linebacker later. That's obviously going to be one of the big points that we'll talk about tonight, because that is, at least in my opinion, the biggest gap right now on this defense. But for now, what we're going to talk about is defensive end, because this is a position that the Bills have invested quite a bit in, right? Like in the last couple of years, they've gone out and gotten Von Miller in free agency. They've drafted AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham in the second round. They've drafted Greg Rousseau in the first round. There's a lot of assets, a lot of premium assets being spent at a position that unfortunately has not those investments. Von Miller has been spectacular. It's unfortunate that he had his ACL tear on Thanksgiving, but one would expect him to be back. Maybe not for the start of the season, but at some point during the season, and you expect him to work his way back, and probably by November, December, he'll be at 100% ready to go and be the Von Miller that we saw last year. At least we expect that. Yeah, it's tough. An ACL tear is not going to completely derail your career, obviously, but it is tough. Just sort of the older that you get. He is 33, going to be 34, I believe. So yeah, it is also something that he's done before. He's come back from an ACL tear before, but you know, it is what it is. Greg Rousseau took a step forward. Is still a very, very, very good run defender. Improved as a pass rusher, but isn't necessarily at this point that type of guy, right? Like he's not 12, 13 sacks type of guy. But he provides you a great floor, and working opposite of Von Miller is fantastic and great. I think that he is going to be a really, really good player. I think that you will continue to see more growth from Greg Rousseau. And it's important to remember with Rousseau, right? This is someone who did not play this position until he got to college. He was a wide receiver in high school. And actually, I'm now kind of surprised that we aren't seeing more Rousseau to wide receiver takes now that I bring it up. Not that I want to see them, to be clear. But you know, we spent all of 5 years of Tremaine Edmunds' career here in Buffalo, you know, talking about, oh, Tremaine Edmunds, he should just move to edge, and that was never going to be the case, and not something that should have been done. I'm just surprised we haven't seen that with Greg Rousseau and moving to a wide receiver, given how much so many guys want a wide receiver. Yeah, I think Greg Rousseau, as RJ points out, surpassed his draft position. I would kind of agree with that. I mean, he was not to take him at 31 with what they've gotten from him in his first 2 years, pretty good. And his advanced metrics were fantastic last year. They were really, really good. Just a good player. And it's important to like I was saying, you know, a wide receiver in high school, started playing edge in college, was only in college for a single season, freshman, but he was somebody that got affected by COVID. He ended up opting out because of COVID, and then declaring right after. This is somebody who hasn't had a ton of coaching at that level to play that position. So now that you have a chance to get this guy, this big ball of clay, to turn him into somebody that I think could really be a legitimately good to great type of player. Is he a Von Miller type? Probably a good player. And it's very clear that he's a good player. I think that if you can consistently get those 8 to 10 sack seasons from Rousseau, along with the fact that he is a genuinely good run defender, you've got something really, really good. The problem, of course, is not with Greg Rousseau or Von Miller. It's the fact that the other guys like Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa have not turned out well. Boogie Basham barely sees the field, it feels like. I feel like there's maybe a handful of impact plays that I've seen Boogie Basham make in his 2 years here in Buffalo. AJ Epinesa, same kind of thing. And with Epinesa, it's unfortunate because, the Bills basically took a player that they then decided that they were going to change how he played his position, college, and then they were also going to change his body composition. So they basically took a player that they didn't like his physical makeup and they didn't like how he played relative to their defense. So then why did they take him? It's a very, very unfortunate start to AJ Epinesa's career. And he's had a couple of decent plays here and there, but it's been very, very scattershot for Epinesa. And he's not necessarily somebody that I'm going to sit in a draft room and say, Bills draft room. I'm not sitting there and going to say, like, well, we don't need to take a defensive end like a Derek Hall or a Isaiah Foskey because we have AJ Epinesa. Like, that's not what AJ Epinesa is at this point. He's not we're not taking this player because we have AJ Epinesa. He's not that guy. I wish he were, but right now he's not. And hope is not a plan. The Bills have kind of built their roster around that idea that hope is not a plan. You need to have a fallback if something does not work, whether it's, Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa not working out. You still need another defensive end. If if Spencer Brown is not the guy, this is why you bring in David Questenberry back, even if Questenberry is not necessarily the most inspiring name to have in there in the first place. But you still have someone else there to fall back on. And in terms of getting somebody that will fit in the to help this defense, there's two names, and I actually just brought both of them up. Isaiah Foskey. We'll start with Foskey from Notre Dame. This is a really interesting player, and you just kind of you turn on the tape of Isaiah Foskey, you look at him, and you're like, this is totally a Sean McDermott Brandon Beane type of defensive end, right? Like, this is somebody that is built well, 6'5", 264, 34-inch arms. He kind of fits all of those little, height, length requirements that they like in their defensive ends. He's got a 4.66 10-yard split. This is all pretty good measurables. He even had a really great broad jump, 125 inches for the broad jump. That is great explosion that you really want to see from him. Especially at that weight is super, super impressive. I think that what Foskey brings is a really great level of strength. I think he sets the edge pretty well, which again is very important for how the Bills run this defense. And between Frazier and McDermott, even though they both kind of come from the same guy, I think that a lot of the sort of core concepts are still going to be similar. So with somebody like Foskey, you want somebody who's going to be able to set that edge, who's going to maintain that play strength throughout the play, and be solid against the run. You want an edge to be a good pass rusher. I mean, it's today's NFL. You need a good, genuine pass rusher. And when you have guys like Von Miller and Greg Rousseau to begin with, now you're looking at somebody who can rotate in and still get you a consistent pass rush. someone like Foskey could really do that. I think that he's got enough movement, enough explosion, and I think if you start to put together a real pass rush plan for him, which a lot of rookies coming out of college, they just don't have that. It's just not something that's taught to them a lot of the time. You know, someone like a Joey Bosa had a pass rush plan, like that type of guy. That's how you get a major impact. You are ready to go with that from day one. The reality is just that so few guys have that. Even Khalil Mack coming out of Buffalo didn't have a pass rush plan. He had 5.5 sacks, I think, as a rookie. But you saw a ton of pressures. He just wasn't able to finish a lot of the time because he had to spend that extra 0.5 seconds getting to the quarterback. And that time gets shaved off when you are ready to go. You have something in mind of how to attack this tackle. If he makes this move, then I'm coming inside. If he makes this move, I'm going outside. If he's setting here, then I'm doing this. If that sort of stuff. It's a lot to process as a rookie because you're also trying to remember your own assignment. If this isn't a pass, if this is a draw, then I have to stay in this lane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a lot of thinking. It's why rookies tend to hit a wall at some point, is because they have to keep thinking and not playing. But with somebody like Foskey, he's somebody that just seems ready for this role. And it's really interesting watching him in Notre Dame because they have him stand up a lot. They don't have him in the dirt a lot. They have him standing up as an edge. Obviously, in this Bills defense, you're going to have your hand in the dirt more often than not. But it is interesting that you can see him moving in space. He's not super great in space. He's not super great in that sort of space. Like, you don't want him dropping into coverage. You don't want him to have to defend those hook curl type of things. It's not, and I don't think the Bills would necessarily even ask him to do that most of the time. But with some things like simulated pressures where you're, bringing linebackers into the A gap and then bringing one and then dropping like a defensive end into coverage, you at least feel a little comfortable with the idea that someone like Foskey has done that before, right? He has been able to just sort of be like, all right, I know what to do here. I know how this translates. I know how to take certain steps and get to this position now. So I think that's an important part of makeup. He's also weirdly had 4 blocked punts in his career, which is kind of impressive. And I'm sure the Bills, obviously with the Bills being very special teams oriented, or not special teams oriented. There's only so much you can do in terms of special teams in any. What they obviously value special teams to a great degree, and if you're a rookie, you're going to have to play special teams for this team, because it's you're not going to always get on. There's some guys where they will, from day one, you're the guy. Like whether that's Trey White in 2017, he was the starting corner. Tremaine Edmunds in 2018, starting Mike linebacker, and there were no questions about that. There are other guys like Matt Milano, who obviously was a 5th round pick, who come on later after they get tired and realize that Ramon Humber is not the ball games. Or Spencer Brown. Spencer Brown got put into the starting lineup because you had an injury to that position. You're intending to have Spencer Brown be the guy, but they didn't really have any choice. And well, it is what it is with someone like there with that. But we are going to move on from Foskey. We're going to talk about Derek Hall, who I'm not entirely certain. Actually, before we do that, real quick, because there's a Oliver talk, thoughts on signing Oliver, trade Ed in a 1st round to the Giants for Lawrence. We will get into that discussion with defensive tackle, which is going to be right after we talk about Auburn defensive end Derek Hall. I'm not 100% sure that Derek Hall is a Bills type of player. He's 6'2", he's 254, 34-inch arms. He's got that smaller frame. I think he's a good player. I think he will be a good player in the NFL. He's got tons of energy. Just based on how this defense plays and is built, I don't know if this is necessarily their type of guy. I think the guy that probably, if I were to, sort of put together someone that potentially you could say like, oh, well, this is somebody that's played in this defense and been successful in this defense that's similar, probably Trent Cole when he was in Philadelphia with Sean McDermott. But even then, I mean, Trent Cole was still 265. A 7-pound difference is not this pound difference, so it does kind of make a difference. I'm not 100% sure if someone like a Derek Hall is necessarily that type of guy. It would surprise me a little bit if they do end up taking someone like him, but I think that he brings a lot of like other things outside of his sort of physical makeup that I think the Bills really appreciate. He's super aggressive, really good, just like being in on every play and being that high energy type guy that the Bills tend to like. He's very explosive. He's just somebody that you can see on every play, just like going after the ball, going into pursuit, is not somebody who's going to just sort of, give up on a play or anything like that. The big thing, though, is just that he's not overly bendy. He's explosive, but not bendy. Sort of the same thing with Faux, where it's like, this is somebody that's going to be a little bit limited in that regard. But I think the frame and his build and his size, I think is just sort of what's going to end up keeping the Bills from taking someone like Derek Hall. I do think that it's possible that they take someone like him. I think it would be really great if they did, because I think this could be a really good player for them and a bit of a change up from their usual type of guy to take. But it's hard to say that, yes, this is somebody that they're 100% in on. But given that, given where they're going to be end up picking, it's hard to find a lot of impact type of defensive ends that are worth taking where they're going to end up picking. Someone like a Derek Hall is going to be available to them where they'll end up picking in the end of the first round and even into the second round, I think. But it's a matter of, do they like him enough to sort of go against the grain in their own evaluations and sort of, well, not their own evaluations, obviously. If they really, they're going, if they felt really strongly about Derek Hall to actually take him, then they're going with their evaluations. What they would be going against are their sort of standards and their usual tendencies, I guess, is the important distinction to make there. I like Derek Hall. I'd be pretty excited if they ended up taking someone like him. I just don't know how likely it is, just sort of based on what the Bills have done. And again, McDermott taking over the defense might cause a bit of a shift and change in that regard, but we'll see. I'm not exactly holding my breath in this particular case. We're going to move on to interior defensive line. So let's talk about Ed Oliver first, because we've already been talking about Ed Oliver in the chat. Do you like Ed Oliver? I think that he's a good player, but that he's also inconsistent, right? I think that the lack of size shows up a little more often than I'd like. When he's able to get one-on-one and win with that explosion and that quickness and that speed, he's almost impossible to block at times. There's times where he will just be super disruptive because of that, and take over a game, whether but most likely on Thanksgiving, because that seems to be the games where he does his best. I do think that is he worth a potential long-term contract, especially like at that position? Because Jeffrey Simmons very recently just got signed to a very and I'm gonna very, very quickly try and bring this up. Signed a 4-year, $94 million contract, including $24 million signing bonus, 59.3 guaranteed, average annual salary of 23.5. I'm not paying Ed Oliver that kind of money. I'm just not. I think that's Ed Oliver's a good player. I think most people would probably agree with the fact that Ed Oliver's a good player. Is he a 20-something plus $1 million a year type of good? I don't think so. And if that's the case, what do you do with that? Now, on the one hand, you can say, like RJ says, I would not resign him unless he has a monster season this year. I think he's kind of lazy during games. There are times he'll disappear for quarters or games at a time. That's all fair. We saw it in that Bengals game where, you're going against backups, and it wasn't just Ed Oliver, but when you're a top 10 pick in your third or fourth year, 19, 20, 20, yeah, fourth year. I can do math. In your fourth year, you're going against backups at home in a divisional round game, and you're just getting blown off the ball consistently. Yeah, that's a tough look, and that's a tough thing to commit, $20+ million a year to. We should definitely resign him. We should try and get this done early, blah, blah, blah. But then the other side of that is if you try and get rid of him, if you try and trade him, you'll probably have a market. And I think it'll be bigger than most people expect, because most people are going to look at Ed Oliver and say, hey, I remember him coming out of Houston. All right, he's been successful in the NFL. If we bring him onto this team here, that maybe the Bills just haven't been able to. So I think you could see a third-round pick. I think you could see even as high as a second-round pick for someone like Ed Oliver. And that would be a good return. But the other part of this is the fact that you then have to replace Ed Oliver at this point with a rookie, and rely on a rookie to be your starting 3-tech when you're making a Super Bowl run. That's a tough sell. I think that, in my opinion, I don't know how likely it is, unless the Bills get a great offer, right? I'm talking bare minimum second-round pick, maybe even sort of a replacement level defensive tackle that's a veteran, plus even a 2024 pick, a late day 3, 2026 or something like that. That would kind of be the minimum for me to move on from Ed Oliver. And it's not just because I believe in Ed Oliver wholeheartedly and something like that. It's because if you are creating a big gap in your defense that you're then having to fill with either a veteran that you probably weren't all that interested in to begin with, otherwise you would have signed him by this point in the offseason, or you're replacing him with a rookie. And to be perfectly frank, there's not a ton of rookies that are going to be worth that type of production in their rookie year. They're just not. It's a tough position. There are some guys that I like, and we'll talk about them, but in terms of replacing what Ed Oliver can do, the whole the grass is always greener on the other side kind of deal, but it's going to be it's going to be more difficult than I think people realize to replace what Ed Oliver does there. And again, he has his issues. I wish we saw a bit more consistent effort game to game, but he's still your starting 3 tech. He's still a good player and is more than capable of making impact plays. Now, with that being said, we're going to kind of talk about some potential guys that are either going to be taking that position or that are going to be the future of this defense at this position. And right off the top, we're going to talk about Mazi Smith from the University of Michigan. This is a strong man. If you have the chance to watch Michigan defense, watch number 58 in the middle. This dude is big and strong. There's no doubts about that. He is honestly, it's kind of weird. He came into the combine. He's at 6'3", 323 pounds. He looks lighter than 323 pounds, I'll be honest. He carries his weight extraordinarily well. He is somebody that you feel like has a good baseline because of that size and that strength. I think that he has a pretty solid base on how to use his hands as well. I do think that I'm not sold on how he fits into this defense with what they've done in the past, right? Because I don't know how much of an attack, like an occupier, which would be nice to have in this defense because it would free up linebackers and other defensive linemen to do what they do. But I don't think that's what they really prioritize in this defense. This is an attacking defense. This is not a read and occupy defense. This is an attacking defense, which means you've got your gap and you're hitting it and you're going 1,000 disruption, some sort of chaos in the backfield. It's why they like Ed Oliver. It's why they wanted Ed Oliver to be that guy, because Ed Oliver can be that guy. It's just a matter of consistency and overcoming that lack of size that Ed Oliver has. Whereas somebody like Mazi Smith has the size. That's not the problem. He has the size, the physical makeup to do what a different type of defense wants him to do. I think that Mazi Smith could be a fit for this defense, but it will mean changing sort of how this defense operates and functions. I don't think the Bills are necessarily going to do that. It's possible that they view someone like Mazi Smith as a potential Daquan Jones replacement because, again, Daquan Jones, he's sort of in that similar size and style, but he's also 33 years old, and he's only got so many years left. A year of his contract. So they could look at Mazi Smith and be like, hey, this is sort of somebody that we might need to take now and sort of rotate him in, get him a little bit of experience, have him learn under Daquan Jones, all that good fun stuff, so that when Daquan Jones leaves, we have somebody that we can feel really comfortable in saying, this is going to be the guy, this is going to be the future of this defense in the middle. This is essentially going to be our Star Lotulelei from when McDermott was in Carolina, which would be great. I think that would be a really great pick. It just depends on how the Bills end up viewing Mazi Smith in relation to what they want to do defensively. I would be really excited if Mazi Smith was the pick. I think it would be a really good sign of sort of looking for this defense while also still finding someone that can rotate and be a good player and contribute in year one. I think it would be a really good pick, and I'd really like that. Another guy me and could really just end up being this is one of those guys that can be a better pro than he was a college player, and that is Gervon Dexter from Florida. Again, this dude is big, he is long, he's got a good motor to him. This is now what Florida asked Gervon Dexter to do was sort of different from what he's probably really good at. I think when Gervon one and attacking a gap like what the Bills do on defense, he can win and he can win effectively. I think that could be something that the Bills are looking at because what Florida does on defense, or what they did this past year, they were a very read type of defense, right? You were going to read, you were going to look and process what the offense was doing, and then you were going to kind of occupy, and then you were going to let the rest of the defense sort of take care of the actual play itself. That's not what the Bills do. They are not a read and occupy. They are attack, attack, attack. And someone like Dexter, when he gets the ability to attack, when he's allowed to do that, he's going to do it. And this is definitely someone that, gets criticized for being slow off the snap. And I don't really think that's a matter of being slow off the snap so much as it is just him trying to do what the coaching staff is asking him to do, right? Which is make the reads and make movements based off of those reads. I think it's just a lot of thinking for him, and that's not really what he wants to do. It's not really his style. It's not how he wins. He gets into an attack style defense, whether that's the Bills. The Jets are very similar in this regard. A lot of those Seattle type of defenses are very similar in that we're just going to attack, like what DeMeco Ryans runs with the Niners, very similar. But I think this is somebody that could be a really good fit for this defense. He's got a good motor too. I like that he's I like big guys that don't give up. Somebody to constantly be moving and chasing and running, and especially when you're going against guys like Lamar Jackson and Mahomes, right? I mean, if there's somebody that and forces you to constantly be in chase, someone like Mahomes, who the Bills have obviously gone against pretty much every year now, it's tough, and you got to be able to have that motor and be okay with just running and chasing sometimes. So I think that someone like Dexter, who was not necessarily the most well utilized in college, could be somebody that in the NFL really takes a bigger step forward and becomes a better pro than he was in college. I think that idea kind of appeals to the Bills. Just sort of the idea, it's the same sort of thing with like Josh Allen, right? Where this is, Allen obviously super raw and didn't get a ton of opportunities in college. So when he gets to the NFL, the Bills just sort of say like, hey, this is worth the risk, because the potential for high reward with Josh Allen was very, very high. And the Bills, to their credit, were able to surround him with a good offense with just really good pieces that allowed him to thrive. I think that adding someone like Gervon Dexter, not saying that he's like the Josh Allen of defense. That's not what I'm trying to say here, obviously. But what I do think is that someone like him can just go to a different team that recognizes what he can do, and allow him to just go and attack and be a really, really good disruptive type of player. Last guy that we'll talk about on the interior, Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. Super, super strong, stout defensive tackle. You look at this guy, you watch him play at Wisconsin. This is a tough dude to go against, because he is just not going to move. Like you're not gonna drive this dude off the ball with one blocker. You're gonna need two guys to really move Keanu Benton. He's a tough guy to move around. The contact balance is really impressive, I think. But he's sort of like the defensive ends that we talked about, where the lateral mobility, the sort of quickness and agility is not necessarily there with someone like Benton. And in some ways, he's almost like a bizarro Ed Oliver, where Ed Oliver wins with a lot of quickness, a lot of speed, and being able to shoot a gap really effectively. because he has to make up for his lack of size and strength. Keanu Benton has the size and strength. We're talking, 6'4", 30, almost 34-inch arms, 309 pounds. This is a very typical defensive 3-tech build. He's winning with strength and persistence. He's not winning with quickness and agility and an ability to be disruptive. He is somebody that I'd struggle to say that he's an occupier, but he's definitely one of more of a reader type of guy where if the defense flows, if the play is moving this way, he's coming back and he's going to be in the position to be where he needs to be, so that if the running back tries to stop and come back the other way, he's there and he's going to make the play. Whereas at Oliver, if the defense is going this way, he's already half a step beyond everyone, the running back to the hole, essentially. It's just that sometimes he's going to get washed down, or sometimes, Ed Oliver's just going to, get overpowered, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need to explain Ed Oliver to people who have already watched plenty of Ed Oliver. Keanu Benton, I would be fine with Keanu Benton. I'm not how he fits into this defense, but again, if this is somebody that the Bills are interested in and end up taking, I have faith that they know how to use him. I think that would be fine. I think that's a fine pick. It wouldn't necessarily be my favorite pick of the class, probably, but it would be fine. On to the next position, and that is a big topic of conversation because it's linebacker. And the Bills had a starting linebacker and have had a starting linebacker at the Mike 5 years. He is now with the Chicago Bears. It was tough to see Tremaine Edmunds go for me. I really liked Tremaine Edmunds. I thought he took a really great step this year. I think he's going to be fantastic in Chicago. Eberflus loves his linebackers. And I do think that it's going to be very, very difficult to replace what Tremaine Edmunds brings to this defense, because it's not just the freakish ability and athleticism and length that he brought to the middle of the defense. It's his ability he called all the plays on defense. He on the field, making sure everybody was in position to make plays. He was there to do what he needed to do and was a great leader for this defense. And that's not something that's really all that easily replaceable. However, one name that's been consistently brought up and mocked to the Bills has been Jack Campbell from Iowa. And Iowa does run similar defense to what the Bills do, or at least what they ask Jack Campbell to do on defense is similar to what the Bills would ask him to do on defense as well. And this is somebody who tested really well. This was a bit of a surprise when he got to the combine and he tested the way that he did, because nobody really expected that. You look at the tape, this is not necessarily a super fast guy like somebody we'll talk about next in Trenton Simpson from Clemson. This is not like somebody who's super fast in a straight line. He runs a 4.65, which is fine for 6'5", 250 pounds. That's perfectly fine and reasonable. It's sort of that above that test that you would want. But it's stuff like the vertical jump, the broad jump, the 3-cone drill. And we're talking about really impressive numbers here. But also impressive, a 6'7" 4 for a 3-cone is really freaking good for somebody who's 6'5", 250 pounds. A 10'8" broad jump and a 37.5 vertical. This is really impressive stuff. This is a really athletic player, and it's also somebody who is kind of pro ready. This is, maybe he's not the most aggressive player in terms of making plays in the backfield, But I do think this is somebody that the Bills, I don't want to say that they have to take him, but I'd be kind of hard pressed to not take Jack Campbell in this draft. The real question among Bills fans seems to be how high is too high for Jack Campbell? Because off-ball linebacker is a position that does not hit particularly well in the first round. You think back to that 2018 class, which had a ton that were taken in the first couple rounds. You had Tremaine Edmunds, obviously. You had Roquan Smith, who got paid by the Ravens a huge contract, which set the market essentially for Tremaine Edmunds as well, to get paid by Chicago. You have Leighton Vander Esch, you had Rashaan Evans, and then in the second round, you had Darius Leonard, and then in the third round, you had Fred Warner. I think that that class, you have 6 guys that got taken in the first 3 rounds. There's probably others that I'm forgetting, or at least ones that didn't stand out. But, in the first round, I mean, Rashaan Evans is already on his second team, and I'm not even 100% sure that Atlanta brought him back. He was originally drafted by Tennessee, looked to be like a solid player in this first year or two there. Just didn't work out for him. And it's not like the Titans were bad defensively as a unit or even had a bad defensive line in front of him. He just wasn't the guy. And Leighton Vander Esch played phenomenal as a rookie, but injuries really have hampered his progression in the NFL, I think. He ended up re-signing with Dallas this past offseason. But I think that, Jack Campbell, I mean, RJ's comment up here. I don't get what everyone says. I don't get why everyone says Jack Campbell's a round 2 guy. From what I saw weekly watching Iowa, he always looked like he could be a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. It's Edmunds with instincts. John Herring says Jack Campbell's the only defensive player I would take in the first round. There's been some pushback among Bills fans, not necessarily from you guys, obviously. I just read your comments, but there's been some pushback about, this is not somebody you should take in the first round. It's not, this is, if he's the 50th best player on your board, you shouldn't take him at 27. But just year to year, the difference, the margins between the 27th best player and the 50th best player, it's not that much. It's really not that much. It's pretty thin, and especially in this class, which is not a great overall class to begin with, I think those margins are even slimmer. So taking somebody like Jack Campbell at 20 is not much of a reach at all if you think about it, because you're getting somebody whose athletic profile looks phenomenal, like phenomenal. A really good athletic profile, somebody who's super experienced in an NFL type of defense that is similar to what the Bills run, and you add in the fact that this is a position of need. It's really the biggest position of need, I think. You could argue right tackle, you could argue wide receiver 2, I guess. I wouldn't agree with that, but I think that someone like Jack Campbell should be one of the guys that they should be totally targeting at the top of the first round. The big thing is going to be if they don't take him because someone else is there, whether that's an offensive tackle like a Darnell Wright or even a Jackson Smith and Jigba at wide receiver, and they just are so enamored with those types of guys that they have to take them. It's going to be what John Herring brings up here. The problem is if you trade back, one of those teams at the top of the second round could take Campbell. If you take someone else at the end of the first round, you're going to have to trade up into the early second round to take Jack Campbell, because he will be one of those guys that a lot of teams are going to be like, this guy, we got to try and get this guy. I think that obviously a lot of the draft is just about playing the board and letting the board fall to where you want it to. If guys like Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, Darnell Wright. If those guys are already gone, and they all might be, just sort of based on the strength of this class not being all that great, will probably should end up being the pick at 27. I think that that's a very reasonable thing. I think, some people will be upset about it because, it's not a wide receiver. It's not a sexy position. It's not an offensive line, blah, blah, blah. But I think that this is a position that they're going to have to address because looking at line, just re-signed A.J. Klein. Sure, whatever. You have Tyrell Dodson, who, when Tremaine Edmunds has been hurt with injuries before, has been the one to call the plays. He's the one with the green dot, and he's been on the team for a while. You have All-Pro Milano. You have Terrell Bernard, who was a third-round pick last year, and quite a confusing third-round pick on top of that. But do you feel like he's going to be the Mike? If they commit to Terrell Bernard being the Mike, that really does signal a big change in defense, I would think. So I can't imagine a scenario in which Jack Campbell gets passed on at 27 if he's available, and other guys like, a legit wide receiver or a legit offensive tackle are not there. I don't know how you pass that up, I think. The other person that we'll talk about linebacker is Trenton Simpson from Clemson. I'm going to briefly talk about that. This is sort of not someone that I think the Bills are overly interested in, because Trenton Simpson reminds me a lot of another linebacker from Clemson, and that's Isaiah Simmons. Simmons, coming out of Clemson, was a big Swiss Army knife, basically. He was another one of these positionless defenders types, which is exactly why Steve Keim in Arizona took him, because he's just so freaking obsessed with those types. Or at least he was. He doesn't have a job anymore because he was so obsessed with those types, among other things. But we won't talk about the disaster organization the Cardinals are right now. But Trenton Simpson is sort of similar, where he got used in a lot of different positions on Clemson's defense in the last couple of years. And I like positional versatility in general, but but this is not a positionless defense. This is a defense that relies on you being in a specific role and a type. And I feel like drafting, excuse me, so what happens when you talk for 53 minutes straight. Gosh. I think that when you look at this Bills defense, I just don't know if there's a role for him there that is not already being occupied by someone. I feel like drafting Trenton Simpson is almost a little redundant when you have someone like a Terrell Bernard on your team. Obviously, they're different players. I'm not trying to compare them and their playing styles one-to-one or anything like that. But they're both lighter type of linebackers, and they're more away from the ball initially because they're not going to attack blocks overly effectively. They're not going to, play it super well in the mud of the offensive line. They're not going to hit that trash super well. I don't think that that's what the Bills need right now. I would much rather have a Jack Campbell than a Trenton Simpson. That's just there are teams where Trenton Simpson could be really, really good on. I just don't know that the Bills are going to end up being one of those types of teams. So we are going to move on to the next position. We're going to spend a very brief amount of time on this because it's cornerback, and the Bills already have a ton of cornerbacks. They've got Trey White now fully healthy. They've got Kyer Elam last year. They've got Christian Benford. They've got Dane Jackson again. They're super deep. There's been a couple of people who have mocked Cam Smith from South Carolina to them in the first round. I don't get that at all. I don't know why anyone is mocking Cam Smith to the Bills at that pick. I can't possibly begin to imagine them taking yet another corner in the first round. I just don't see that happening. I think that this is going to be something. I'd be surprised if they took a corner, period. Maybe late day 3 they take a corner, just sort of based on like, hey, you know, we'll this is the guy on our board, and he can give us some special. But whatever, man. I'm not interested in talking about corners. There's no point in talking about them. Let's move on. Let's move on to safety. Because this is actually a much more interesting conversation, because we were not expecting initially for Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer to be back this year. We knew Micah Hyde was still under contract and was going to be coming back from neck fusion surgery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When Jordan Poyer decided to make Drew Rosenhaus his agent last year, that was a pretty strong signal to Bills fans that he was not happy with his contract and he was not happy with where things were. And you kind of felt like the Bills weren't going to bring him back for the money they wanted. So you felt like Poyer was just on his way out. Turns out he tests the market, doesn't like what he is being offered, so he comes back to Buffalo. Great, that's good, because now you've got your starters. Poyer for another year. That's awesome. Hyde's contract is up after this year, and Poyer has an out on his contract after this year, which means that right now for 2023, your starting safeties are great. In 2024, you have no safeties. And the Damar Hamlin situation obviously is part of this conversation because we don't know if he's going to be able to play football again. He seems to want to play football again, which is fine. More power to him for wanting to do that and trying to come back from what happened. But, if he goes at it again and gets into a couple weeks of practice and it's like, you know what, don't want to do this anymore, it wouldn't surprise me and it wouldn't upset me. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And I think that it's tough to feel 100% confident that Damar Hamlin is part of the future of the team. I hope that he is, because I think he's a great guy and has made plays for this team before. And is obviously somebody that they like. But, it's a very unique situation with Damar Hamlin. But the other thing that's interesting with the safety position is the signing of Taylor Rapp, because he was only signed to a 1-year $1 million deal, but he mentioned that his future with this team is sort of what helped sell him on signing with the Bills, which makes it seem like they're very interested in keeping Taylor Rapp beyond 2023, and that they're kind of just using this year as like, you're going to be in the spot. We'll maybe run some 3 safety looks with you. We'll have you in the box maybe sometimes, but you're not going to be the starter this year. If that's the case, that's fine, because I think Taylor Rapp is a great fit for this defense and what they want to do. And I think that he's been solid with LA. He had kind of his best seasons with Brandon. He had his best season with Brandon Staley. Hang on one sec. Jordan Poyer was signed to a multi-year deal. There is an out after the, so they could keep him for 2024, but they have an out after 2023. And I think that there's probably a reason for that. Whether that was something that Poyer wanted or something that the Bills wanted, I don't know. But that's part of the deal with Poyer. But with Rapp, I think that he's going to be part of the future for this defense. And I think that if Hamlin is not able to do this moving forward, again, that's fine. But you need somebody else. And while this group of safeties in this class is not there's no consensus top guys, there's guys like a Sidney Brown that are interesting, but Sidney Brown is also very undersized. There's a lot of depth to this class, but not a lot of standouts. But one guy that did stand out, at least to Anthony Prohaska while he was at the Senior Bowl, was Christopher Smith from Georgia. You could go to Anthony's. You could probably just look up, Anthony Prohaska and Christopher Smith, and you'd probably find quite a few tweets and videos of him breaking down what Christopher Smith does. I think that finding a potential future starting safety for this defense is important. I think that Christopher Smith could be somebody that they look at. You don't need to do anything this year, essentially. We'll play you on special teams. You'll learn the playbook. Next year is going to be your time, essentially. I think that somebody like a Christopher Smith could be a really good guy to stash. The question is, where is he? How high do you end up drafting someone that? Hold on. Okay. I've got David Stevens, round round 2, Jack Campbell, round 3, Juwan Jones. Juwan Jones is not lasting to round 3, and he's probably not lasting to round 2 either. Just letting you know right now. So don't think that that's a realistic forecast of what the Bills will be able to do. But with Christopher Smith, I think that this is somebody that could fit in this defense really, really well. He's got good experience in a very difficult defense playing at Georgia. It's a very hard defense to learn. It's very tricky. He did a great job when he was there. It's just a matter of how much do you trust a, kind of smaller-ish framed. He's built fine. He's 5'11", 192. That's not deficient or anything. But he's also not the most athletic person either. He's got a 4'6", 240. He had a 33-inch vertical, a 9'8" broad jump. It's all okay, but it's not standout, and it's not something on physical traits to then develop as time goes on. So it would really be about maximizing what he can do rather than changing to someone else based on sort of raw athleticism, because that's just not who he is. There's a lot of different safeties that could. I think that they'll end up taking a safety at some point. I don't know. Maybe it's a Christopher Smith. Maybe it's a Kayvon Merriweather from Iowa. Maybe it's a Riley Moss from Iowa. I don't know. As Ralph Wilson Sr. says from Beyond the Grave, lousy safety class, very good corner class. Pick a corner and put Benford at safety full time. That's a very reasonable take, I think, because they talked about when they drafted Benford last year from Villanova that they saw some potential to convert into safety. Depth at corner, because you have Trey White, you have Kyer Elam, and you brought back Dane Jackson, and obviously you have Teron Johnson starting at nickel. That allows you the ability to kind of take Christian Benford and say, hey, let's see what you got at safety, because, we would like to see if this could be the future for what we want. And if that works out, then you have Taylor Rapp and Christian Benford. You still have 2 starting corners under contract moving forward. Your secondary is pretty much set at that point. But we'll see. I think regardless of that, they'll to be a very logical fit and option for this team. That would be a really good pick, I think, for them. Of course, that sort of depends on where they end up picking him, but that kind of goes through all of it. Even though I am totally losing my voice and my throat is pretty sore right now because I've been talking for over an hour straight, we're still going to do Truth or Rubbish because why not? like it here. We like doing truth or rubbish. So let's get into it.
Truth or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. So I've only got a few written down here. There's only going to be it's not going to be a lot. It's not actually not really going to have too much to do with the Bills. So first thing, true or rubbish? If the Bills take a defensive end in the first round, Bills fans will be about that. Is that true or rubbish? I would say probably rubbish. I don't think that
that is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
I don't think people will be all that excited about a defensive end in the first because of how much they've put into defensive end at this point, and probably just feeling like there are other positions like linebacker, or as Mary Foster says, thank you, linebacker, wide receiver, even tight end, defensive line. Like, there's other positions for this team that, something like defensive end in the first round is asking for a lot, in my opinion. I don't know about that one. The next two questions are going to be draft related rather than Bills related. Bryce Young canceling his remaining pre-draft visits means he has a lock to go number 1 to the Panthers. True or rubbish? I think
this was true. All after all, can't believe it. It was true.
I think that you're not canceling those visits unless you are extremely confident and set that you are going to go number 1 overall. I just, there's been a lot of speculation because there's no clear-cut number 1 quarterback for this class. There's, 4 guys: Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. All have their pluses, all have their flaws, but there's no clear-cut guy. But it seems like Carolina is pretty well set on taking Bryce Young at this point. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Not really that interested in discussing that in the next point. So all right, last true or rubbish has nothing to do with football, actually. True or rubbish? My taxes will be done. The IRS will actually acknowledge my existence.
That is rubbish all after all. It was all rubbish.
Obviously rubbish. So pray for your boy, because we might get audited later. Thank you for watching Cover One. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps us out when you interact. Leave us a comment below. Tell us how we're doing. Our lovely folks at Underdog Fantasy. We thank BetUS as well for sponsoring us. And we, of course, thank all those who are subscribed to Cover One Pass as well. We really appreciate all of the giving that you guys have done, all the views, all the likes, all the comments. We really do appreciate it. It really helps us to have that sort of interaction with us. Really great having you guys on live during the show. Really appreciate it. We will hopefully be back with 2, because my voice is not going to be handling an entire mock draft next week, which is the plan right now. We're going to do a final mock draft next Monday, and then we'll obviously have our Cover One draft show for all 3 days of the draft next week. I am scheduled to be on day 2. If you want to set your calendars to that, so you know which day to avoid. I'm kidding. Please don't avoid me on day 2. I'm very excited to be. I'm very excited about day 2. I love day 2 of the draft. It's a lot of trading. It's a lot of wheeling and dealing. It's really, really weird and interesting. Thank you, RJ. Great job with the one-person show tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being a part of the draft show. We have obviously a great group of guys. We're gonna put together a great show. Yeah, like I said, leave a like, leave a subscribe. You can find these podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. if you're a listener, go ahead and leave us, a 5-star review, or you can leave us an honest review. Against you either. That is going to be it. We will be back next week. Hopefully Kyle will be with us as well. Bye-bye.